You're not just Olivia Mitchell, are you? Sophia asked across the table, fork hovering midair. Her voice sliced through the hum of clinking glasses and soft jazz, drawing all attention to our end of the table. My wine glass paused at my lips. I knew what was coming next, but I wasn't ready for it to come here. Wait, she said slowly, eyes widening. Are you the Olivia Mitchell from next deck? The silence that followed was sudden and absolute. My parents froze. Jason, my perfect older brother and her brand new fiancé, blinked like she'd just spoken another language. Then she whispered the words that shattered everything. You're the founder? Let me take you back a few hours. Bluebird, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, gleamed with chandeliers and river views. Jason and Sophia's engagement dinner was packed with family, wine, and plenty of carefully orchestrated small talk. Everyone there had one thing in common. They thought I was the family failure. Why? Because I didn't become a lawyer like my mom, or a doctor like my dad and brother. I went into tech. And to them, that meant I had potential I'd wasted. Have you ever been at a table full of people who think they already know your story? Ever stayed quiet because explaining yourself feels like shouting into the wind? That was me until tonight. Growing up, being the Mitchell daughter meant chasing prestige. Success was measured by resumes, titles, and how loud your accomplishments echoed at dinner. Jason had a collection of trophies, scholarships, and medical degrees. I had lines of code no one cared about. I showed up to this dinner out of duty, not to impress. I wore a simple black dress, elegant, sharp but understated, no designer logos. No statement jewelry. I didn't want to prove anything, not anymore. Still, the comments started early. My mom, inspecting my outfit, offered a tight smile. Well, you found something to wear. That's nice. Translation? You're not the success story here, but at least you clean up well. Then came the seating chart. I was placed next to Cousin Margaret, the family's go-to for conversations about real estate and weather. Nowhere near Sophia's parents, who were the true VIPs of the night. Dinner began with toasts. My father raised a glass to Jason, praising every step of his impeccable path. My mother followed with a speech listing Jason's achievements, science fairs, scholarships, residencies, and finally, a glowing line about Sophia's role as an executive at a very prestigious tech company. No one mentioned me. Have you ever been so used to being invisible, you almost forget you're in the room? I kept my cool. I always did. Years of therapy had taught me not to fight for space at their table, but to build my own. Still, the sting of being dismissed never fully faded. When Cousin Margaret asked what I was doing these days, I gave her my usual answer: health tech. Database management. Not a lie, but not the full truth either. If you're wondering why I kept quiet for so long, it is simple. I was tired of trying to be understood by people who had already decided who I was. And honestly, I was afraid they'd twist my success into something they could take credit for. So I built Nextech quietly. I became a ghost in the tech world, a known name in industry circles, but a mystery in my own family. My company now served over 300 hospitals. Our software had reduced medical errors and improved care across the country. But to them, I was still the kid with a computer hobby. Until Sophia looked at me like I wasn't a shadow anymore. I caught her staring earlier in the meal, eyes flicking between me and her phone. At first, I thought she was just making small talk. Then she asked the question, "Wait, Olivia Mitchell? Are you the Olivia from Next Deck?" Jason let out a short laugh. "Sophia, you're confusing her with someone else. My sister works in, I support or something." Sophia didn't laugh. Her eyes locked on mine. "No, she's not confused. Are you the founder?" Every eye in the room turned to me. I didn't flinch. I didn't stammer. I just nodded. Yes, I co-founded Nextech. Sophia's jaw dropped. The company my team is negotiating to acquire for over $200 million? Another pause. My father's wine glass froze mid-air. My mother's hand gripped her necklace. Jason's mouth actually fell open. Finally, my dad asked in a hoarse whisper, "Is this true?" I looked him in the eye. Yes, Emma and I built it 6 years ago. We're finalizing the acquisition now. And just like that, the story they'd written about me for years unraveled. The girl they called a dreamer. The daughter they thought had failed. was about to sell her company for more than they'd earn in 2 lifetimes. The rest of dinner was a blur. Questions poured in, some excited, some awkward, some absurd. Relatives who had barely acknowledged me suddenly wanted startup advice. My mom mentioned she always knew I was so good with computers. My dad claimed he'd told his colleagues about me for years. Jason stayed quiet, and I answered what I felt like answering. I smiled. I stayed calm. But inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years around them. Power. Not because of the money, but because I didn't need their approval anymore. Have you ever felt the moment when your truth finally stands louder than their expectations? As dinner wrapped up, Sophia pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to blow up your secret. I just thought I didn't know." I smiled genuinely. "It's okay." Honestly, it was time. Walking to my car, the night air felt crisp and clean. The secret I'd carried for so long wasn't a secret anymore. Tomorrow would bring texts, calls, brunches, questions, but tonight I was finally seen. And I didn't need to say a single word to prove it. I wasn't always the invisible success. There was a time when I tried desperately to be seen, to be heard, to matter. But in a house like mine, being noticed came with a script, and I was always reading from the wrong one. Growing up in Highland Park, where the streets were tree-lined and silence meant prestige, everything about my family was curated. My father, Richard Mitchell, was the surgeon known not just for his skill, but for teaching other doctors how to handle their toughest cases. My mother, Diana, wasn't just an attorney, she was the woman other lawyers didn't want to face in court. And then there was Jason, 4 years older, tall, clean-cut, textbook charming. He was pre-med before he could spell the word medicine. Valedictorian, soccer captain, national merit scholar, he ticked every box before anyone even asked. At the Mitchell dinner table, achievement wasn't discussed, it was performed. So, Mom would ask, pouring wine, what did everyone accomplish today? Jason always had something spectacular. Shadowing a surgeon, winning a scholarship, starting a research project that sounded like it involved space medicine. Then it would be my turn. One evening I remember saying proudly, I built a website over the weekend, taught myself HTML and CSS. Mom smiled. Not warmly. The kind of smile you'd give a neighbor's child showing off a macaroni craft. That's nice, honey, but shouldn't you be focusing on debate? Colleges care about consistency, not hobbies. Dad nodded without looking up. Did you email your chemistry teacher? About those lab scores yet? Just like that, something that lit me up got dimmed into a distraction. Have you ever felt that subtle switch when excitement turns into embarrassment, just because of the way someone responds? I learned to keep my passion quiet. While Jason's walls filled with certificates and trophies, mine became covered in code printouts and sketches of app interfaces. I stayed up learning JavaScript while they watched news specials about local prodigies, always someone else's child. Never me. By 16, I built a scheduling system for our school's massive annual fundraiser. The event coordinator, Mrs. Winters, was floored. Your daughter saved us weeks of work, she told my parents at a school function. My mom smiled politely. Olivia has so many interests, she said, her tone smooth and noncommittal. But we're still focused on law school prerequisites. I hadn't even applied to law school, hadn't said I would. But somehow they'd already mapped my future. All I had to do was fall in line. The breaking point came during my junior year. I'd spent months developing a prototype for a local coding competition, an inventory management system that adjusted stock levels in real time. I made it to the finals. The big day fell on the same Saturday as Jason's med school acceptance dinner. We're so sorry, sweetie, Mom said. But your brother worked so hard for this. You understand, right? They didn't come. I won first place. I came home with a trophy in my hand and found our house full of people toasting Jason's future. I stood in the doorway holding my victory like a secret. That's wonderful, dear, Dad said, barely glancing over his glass. Then he turned back to his guests. That night, something in me changed. I stopped chasing their praise. Have you ever had to decide between being accepted and being authentic? What did you choose? Senior year, the pressure kicked in. Ivy League applications, pre-law programs. We're thinking Yale, my mother would say in passing, like it was already a done deal. Instead, I quietly applied to Illinois Tech, not the fanciest name. But its computer science program was one of the best in the country, and they offered me a full scholarship. When I told my parents, their faces went blank. "You're throwing away your potential," Dad said. "Your test scores could get you into Harvard," Mom added. "Why waste them on computers?" What they meant was, that's not a field worthy of a Mitchell. Jason tried to mediate, as always. "Maybe it's just a phase, Mom. Let her get it out of her system before law school." I left for college that fall with no fanfare. Just silence and tension. But also, for the first time, a strange, beautiful lightness. Because finally, I could do what I loved without being judged for it. College felt like breathing after years of holding my breath. No one rolled their eyes when I mentioned tech. No one asked when I'd switched to something real. There, I was just Olivia, the girl who stayed late in labs, led group projects, and built things people could actually use. In my sophomore year, I met Emma. We were paired in an advanced software engineering class. While others struggled through the final project, we finished early and added features just for fun. We bonded over late-night coding sessions and terrible campus coffee. One night, sitting in a dim corner of the library, she showed me an article about a medical misdiagnosis caused by poor communication between departments. "My mom was misdiagnosed 3 times, she said quietly. "Doctors have the tools, they just don't talk to each other." We started sketching on napkins. What if there was a way to fix that? A platform that actually connected care teams, patients, and data in one clear system? By the end of the semester, we had the skeleton of what would become NextDeck. Meanwhile, back home, nothing had changed. At Thanksgiving, the first question relatives asked Jason was which hospital he was joining. The first question they asked me. "So, when are you switching to a real major?" I stopped trying to correct them. I just smiled and said, "I'm studying technology." "Oh, like tech support?" "Sure, I thought like that." But behind the scenes, Emma and I were building something real. We worked out of her parents' garage. They brought us snacks, asked about our progress. They believed in us in a way mine never had. By junior year, we had a working prototype. We started winning college pitch competitions. A professor introduced us to a hospital administrator who became our first pilot client. We filed our first patent. Meanwhile, my parents arranged for Jason to help me get an admin job at his hospital, just something stable, until I figured things out. That was the last time I shared anything with them about my work. The silence wasn't easy, but it was easier than the dismissal. So I kept building quietly, determinedly, not to prove them wrong, but to build a life they couldn't shrink. One day I promised myself it would all make sense. They wouldn't understand how it happened, but they'd have no choice but to see me. And that day was closer than any of us realized. There's something powerful about building in silence. You stop waiting for applause that never comes. You stop explaining every step to people who aren't really listening. And most of all, you stop doubting yourself just because no one else gets it. That was the space I found myself in by senior year of college. Emma and I had officially launched our startup, NextDeck. We were still coding until 3 a.m., still living on microwave noodles and secondhand coffee machines. But the dream? It was real now. It had shape, edges, momentum. We'd won enough in pitch competitions to file our first patent. We landed a small angel investment from one of the judges, just enough to hire 1 developer and lease 2 desks in a co-working space downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Meanwhile, my family remained comfortably in the dark. Every call home was short and shallow. "How's school?"
"Good. Still doing the tech stuff?" "Yep." "Okay, well, Jason got promoted."
"He's doing rounds at Northwestern now." Big step. It didn't hurt as much anymore, not because it stopped mattering, but because I stopped needing them to care. Have you ever outgrown the version of yourself your family still talks to? Ever felt like you were living 2 lives, only one of them was truly yours? That was me. One version of Olivia Mitchell, the wandering daughter, maybe in IT, probably struggling, still not living up to her potential.
The other?
Co-founder of a health tech platform already used in 5 medical centers and growing fast. Emma and I graduated and moved into a tiny apartment in Chicago's South Loop. We split rent. took side gigs building websites, and used every spare dollar to grow Nextech. Our first office was just a corner of a co-working lounge, 2 desks, crammed between the espresso machine and a group of noisy real estate agents. It wasn't ideal, but it forced us to stay focused. One by one, things started clicking into place. A regional clinic signed on, then a network of outpatient centers. Word spread. We were small, but we were effective. Our platform actually worked. It cut communication delays between doctors. It flagged errors before they became disasters. It gave patients better access to their care. And hospitals were noticing. We brought on our first full-time engineer, Tyler, who had this genius way of solving problems like he was untangling a necklace. Our little team doubled in size, then tripled. By my 25th birthday, we had a proper office. A coffee machine that wasn't from 2007. A product that was saving lives. But when I went home for Christmas that year, I still drove the same old college car. Wore jeans and a basic sweater. Let them believe what they wanted. It wasn't about being petty. It was about protecting what mattered. I wasn't hiding who I was. I was just done trying to prove it. That holiday, Jason announced his engagement to Sophia. A pharmaceutical sales executive. According to him, smart. Gorgeous. Polished. The kind of woman my mother called a real catch, with just a hint of pride in her voice, like Jason had achieved something no one else in the family ever could. At dinner, my mom cornered me in the kitchen. You know, Jason's friend Mark is single, neurologist, quite successful. You two would get along. Translation: if you can't be impressive, at least marry someone who is. I smiled, but I didn't answer. What would have been the point? She didn't know we had just signed a deal with one of the largest hospital networks in the Midwest. That our platform was showing a 30% drop in medical miscommunication errors. That tech blogs were calling us one to watch. And I didn't tell her, not out of spite, out of self-preservation. Have you ever reached a point where you just stopped expecting people to clap for you because your work isn't for them anymore? That's where I was. Jason asked how I was doing in a polite, older brother tone. I gave him the same answer I always did. Things are steady. He nodded, already switching the subject. He had no idea I'd just turned down our first acquisition offer. A few months later, it happened again, another offer. This time from a well-known tech company. Sleek pitch. Generous payout, $30 million for full ownership. Emma and I sat across from a row of clean-cut execs who explained all the benefits: job security, resources, name recognition. They wanted us to sell everything, then come work for them. We could grow your product 10 times faster, one of them said confidently. Emma glanced at me. I already knew the answer. As we left the building, she said, "It's a generous offer."
It is, I agreed. And we're turning it down. We both smiled.
Because we didn't build this to be bought. We built it to change something broken. 2 weeks later, we got another offer, but this time, it was different. Sierra Partners, a respected venture capital firm, offered $30 million, but not for everything, just a minority stake. It valued our company at over $100 million. And we'd keep control. We took it. The announcement made industry headlines. Health Tech Weekly called us the quiet giant of clinical software. Emma's face was all over the press. Mine. Just the name Olivia, co-founder and CEO. No photo, no interviews, no TED Talks. It wasn't that I didn't want credit. I just didn't want them to have it. Because I knew what would happen if my family found out now. They'd act like they'd always believed in me. That they'd seen this coming. They hadn't, and I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. Emma asked me once after another glowing profile ran without my photo, "Don't you want the recognition?" I told her the truth. I do, just not yet. And not from strangers. She nodded, not fully understanding but respecting it anyway. Because the truth was, I wanted to be so undeniably successful that my family couldn't minimize it. So obvious that even they couldn't twist it, but more than that. I wanted to be okay without their approval. Every day I worked toward that peace, quietly, consistently. I was no longer trying to escape their shadow. I was becoming someone they never even saw coming. And soon the world and my family was about to find out. The call came on a Sunday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly projections. My phone buzzed once, Mom, and I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. For once, I didn't regret it. Olivia, wonderful news, she chirped without a greeting. Jason and Sophia have set a date, Labor Day weekend. The engagement dinner will be next month at Bluebird. You'll need to clear your calendar, Bluebird. Chicago's newest Michelin-starred restaurant. Impossible to get into without connections or a 6-month wait list. Clearly, Jason had pulled some strings, maybe through the hospital board or one of Sophia's VIP clients. That's great, I said, genuinely happy for Jason despite everything. I'll be there. Wonderful, she replied, then shifted her tone from celebratory to corrective. And Olivia? It's a very upscale event. Perhaps we should go shopping together. I notice at Christmas your wardrobe is still very collegiate. I looked down at my silk blouse and tailored slacks-and outfit that cost more than her entire wine collection and smiled to myself. I'll find something suitable, Mom. Don't worry. She didn't back down. Just remember, Sophia works for a major technology firm. Everyone will be dressed to impress. It's important we all represent the family well. What company does she work for? I asked casually, sipping my coffee. Horizon something, she said vaguely. I don't recall the full name, but Jason says they're very important in their field. A healthcare tech something or other. My mug froze mid-air. Horizon Health Technologies. I nearly dropped it. I kept my voice calm. Do you know her last name? Winters, she answered. Sophia Winters, why? No reason, I said, heart racing. Just curious. After I hung up, I didn't even wait a second before calling Emma. You are not going to believe this, I said, half laughing in disbelief. My brother is engaged to someone from Horizon. Emma went silent. Then, as in the Horizon? The ones currently trying to acquire us? Exactly. And I think she's involved in the deal. A quick LinkedIn search confirmed it. Sophia Winters, Director of Strategic Acquisitions at Horizon Health Technologies. And I was about to have dinner with her family. While everyone thought I was some kind of tech support dropout, the irony was too rich. Here we were, negotiating a deal worth over $200 million, and no one in my family had any idea I was the one leading the company being acquired. I spent the next week quietly preparing for what could become the most awkward dinner in history. My family continued their barrage of microaggressions. My father left a voicemail reminding me to bring something impressive to discuss, in case Sophia's parents wanted to talk about careers. Then, just days before the dinner, came the most painful call yet. Olivia, my mother began, voice low, like a lawyer broaching a sensitive topic. We need to talk about something delicate. Here we go. Your father and I were chatting with the Winters last night. They asked about you and, well, Jason mentioned you were between jobs. I'm not between jobs, I replied sharply. She continued, undeterred. That little computer help desk position wasn't really something to highlight, dear. Jason was just trying to help smooth things over. I bit the inside of my cheek. He also mentioned that Sophia's father knows someone at Apple. There might be an opening for an entry-level IT role. Isn't that wonderful? We could finally get you on a proper career path. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were arranging pity job interviews for someone negotiating a $200 million acquisition. I'm satisfied with my current position, I said tightly. Don't be proud, Olivia. We all have to start somewhere. The irony was suffocating. I hung up and immediately called Rachel, my oldest friend, the only one from back home who knew the truth about Nextech. They're setting you up for a rescue job, she said, half in disbelief, half in outrage. While you're negotiating the sale of a company to that woman's employer. Yep, I said, laughing to keep from screaming. So what are you going to do at this dinner? She asked. Show up in jeans and a hoodie like they expect. Or go full CEO and blow their minds. I thought about it. Neither, I said finally. I'm just going to be myself. No pretense, no performance, just me. Rachel paused. That's kind of absurd. 5 years of therapy will do that, I said with a small smile. The night before the dinner, Horizon's final offer came in, $215 million, with a condition that Emma and I stay on for at least 3 years post-acquisition. We were about to become centimillionaires. And still, my parents thought I was flailing. But I felt calm, steady, because whatever happened tomorrow night, I knew who I was. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the ghost genius who had quietly built an empire, and tomorrow, that ghost was about to walk through the front door. Bluebird was exactly as I imagined blue velvet banquettes, crystal chandeliers, and an unobstructed view of the Chicago River glittering with reflections of the skyline. I arrived exactly on time. Not early enough to help set up like my mother suggested, not late enough to make an entrance. Just perfectly on time. Like the professional I was. The hostess led me into the private dining room. Jason was already chatting with relatives, beaming as always. My father stood by the bar, likely trading career war stories with Sophia's dad. My mother rearranged place cards with surgical precision. Jason spotted me. "Liv, you made it."
He hugged me with his usual confidence, as if everything in his life had always gone according to plan.
"Come meet Sophia," he said, steering me toward a tall woman in a burgundy dress, standing by the window. I recognized her instantly from Horizon's executive page. We'd never spoken directly. Deals like ours often filtered through intermediaries until the final phase, but I'd seen her signature on NDAs and proposals. "Olivia, this is my fiancée Sophia Winters." Sophia turned, smiling. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Jason talks about you all the time." I extended my hand, steady and warm. "Congratulations on your engagement." My mother appeared beside me like a wisp of disapproval. "Olivia, I see you found something to wear." "That's nice." Then she pointed toward the table. "We've placed you next to Cousin Margaret. You always got along with her." Translation: far from the important guests, I just smiled. Because I knew what was coming, and this time, I didn't need to fight for their respect. The truth was already walking toward them. And it had my name on it. Sophia looked at me for a second too long. It wasn't the casual glance of a woman meeting her fiancé's sister. It was the squint of recognition, the way someone tries to place a face they've seen before but can't quite name. Her brow furrowed slightly. She tilted her head, then her eyes widened. Not dramatically, not enough to make a scene, but enough for me to see the moment it hit her. She leaned in, her voice just above a whisper. "You're not Olivia Mitchell from Next Tech, are you?" I held her gaze, calm, quiet. "I am." Her fork hovered halfway to her mouth, and then slowly lowered back to her plate. "No way, you're that Olivia?" A pause stretched over the table like a wire pulled too tight. Jason, sitting beside her, frowned. "Soph, what are you talking about?" She blinked at him, still staring at me. "Your sister, she's the founder of Nextech." Jason laughed. No, my sister's into IT or app support or something. She doesn't run companies." Sophia didn't laugh. She turned to him, eyes wide. "Jason, she founded Nextech, the company Horizon is acquiring." Jason's expression faltered. "That's not..." "What?" Sophia turned back to me. "I've read your name on every document, Mitchell. I just didn't connect it to you. But it's you, isn't it?" I gave a small nod, keeping my tone measured. "Yes, that's my company." Jason leaned back, visibly trying to process what had just been said. My parents, halfway down the table, noticed the shift in energy. "What's going on over there?" My mother called, lifting her wine glass. Sophia spoke before anyone else could. "Diana, did you know your daughter founded Nextech?" My mom tilted her head, visibly annoyed by the sudden shift in conversation. "What's Nextech?" "It's the company I work with," Sophia explained, her tone edged with disbelief. "The one Horizon is finalizing a $200 million deal with. Olivia is the founder." The room froze. My father, who had just raised a glass of Cabernet to his lips, slowly lowered it. My mother's eyes flicked to me with forced neutrality, trying to stay composed, but failing. Jason looked like he'd been hit with a brick. "You own Nextech?" he said, his voice hollow. "I co-founded it," I corrected, 6 years ago. "Emma and I built it from the ground up." Sophia let out a soft laugh of disbelief. "I've been reading your metrics for months." "Your patient sync tool? The one with a 35% efficiency increase." "That's yours," I nodded. "All of it." The silence around the table grew heavier. Then, almost too casually, my father cleared his throat. "Well, that's quite impressive, sweetheart. We had no idea." No, I said evenly. You didn't? My mother's face stiffened. Olivia, why didn't you ever tell us any of this? I met her gaze, steady and direct. I did. You just weren't listening. Jason finally spoke, his voice sharp. Wait, you mean all those years, the apartment, the side jobs? That was this. I nodded. All of it. Every late night. Every deal. Every ignored phone call because I was in a boardroom pitching to hospitals. While you were asking if I needed help getting a job at the front desk. Sophia looked stunned. You're the reason we're restructuring the entire patient onboarding division. Across the table, Cousin Margaret whispered to Aunt Janice. I could feel the ripple moving down the long oak table, like a wave of rewired understanding. Whispers, stares, calculations. Have you ever watched people rearrange their version of you in real time? Jason shook his head like he was trying to restart the conversation. Why didn't you ever say anything? I exhaled slowly. Because for years, no matter what I said, you all made it clear who you thought I was. I got tired of arguing, so I focused on building. My father shifted in his seat, the weight of the moment too obvious. You could have asked for our help, Olivia. You mean like when I asked you to come to my high school coding competition, and you chose Jason's hospital dinner instead? He looked away. My mother straightened her posture, her voice sharp. Olivia, there's no need for drama. We've always supported you. No, I said, keeping my voice calm. You supported the idea of who you wanted me to be, not who I actually was. Sophia looked at me like I had grown two heads. You've been sitting at this table for years while people talked over you. And you never once said, I'm leading one of the most disruptive healthcare startups in the country. I shrugged. Why waste my breath? Jason looked genuinely thrown, not angry, just lost. I didn't know, Liv. I know, I said. But that's the thing. You never asked. Not really. The silence that followed was different this time, not awkward. Just real, heavy with truth. Then Sophia smiled genuinely. I gotta say, Olivia, that's the most impressive entrance I've ever seen. You're brilliant, and you're ruthless. I'm not ruthless, I said. I'm just not invisible anymore. After dessert, people started coming over, one by one, with their rehearsed lines of amazement. We always knew you were bright. I had no idea you were doing so well. You should have said something sooner. I smiled politely, answered what I felt like. Walked through the compliments like someone used to navigating noise. Because none of it mattered. What mattered was the look on Sophia's face, shocked, impressed, and filled with respect. What mattered was the moment my father paused before speaking, realizing he couldn't shrink this down. What mattered was that I knew what I had built, and no one could take that from me. Outside, as I waited for my ride, Sophia caught up with me. Hey, she said, thank you for being gracious about it all. I nodded. You were kind. That's more than I expected tonight. She looked thoughtful. You changed the game for me, you know? Seeing someone like you build something from scratch, it reminded me why I got into tech. I smiled. That's the best thing you could have said. We shook hands, and for a moment, I felt the weight of something new. A turning point. Because this dinner this night was never about revenge. It was about revelation. And tomorrow. They'd all have to reckon with the version of me they could no longer ignore. The brunch invitation came 2 days later. My mom texted me just after noon. We'd like to have you over this weekend. Just us for brunch, to talk. No emojis. No fluff, just 6 sharp words that told me exactly what kind of brunch it would be. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. Okay. I didn't ask what it was about. We both knew. Sunday morning arrived like a courtroom summons. I wore neutral colors, gray blazer, dark jeans, low heels. Professional, but not loud. Respectful, but not submissive. I brought nothing with me. No laptop, no updates, no slides to explain what I'd accomplished. Just myself. As I walked into the house I grew up in, I felt the weight of 1,000 memories settle on my shoulders. The polished floors, the clean scent of lemon wood cleaner, the same blue vase that had sat on the hallway table since I was 8. Some things never changed. But I had. My father greeted me at the door with an awkward hug. My mother hovered near the dining table, setting down a fruit bowl with the kind of precision usually reserved for legal filings. We sat, no one ate. Mom folded her hands in her lap like she was preparing opening arguments. First, I want to say we're proud of you. It felt like a foreign sentence rolling off her tongue. Thank you, I said. We had no idea, she continued. What you were building, what you've accomplished. It's beyond anything we imagined. Exactly, my father added. Sophia sent over the link to that Forbes article. The valuation alone. I held up a hand gently. I'm not here for congratulations, they stopped. I'm here because you asked to talk, so let's talk. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your chest tighten. I don't want an apology, I said. Not if it's just for show, but I do want honesty. My mother looked startled. My father glanced at her, as if silently asking, do we really go there? Why, I asked. Did you always dismiss me? The question landed like a stone on a glass table. Not violent, just precise, and impossible to ignore. We didn't dismiss you, Mom said softly. You did, I replied. Every time you steered the conversation back to Jason, every time you rolled your eyes when I brought up tech, every time you told me law or medicine was real work and everything else was a phase. My father sighed. We didn't understand it. That world, the tech stuff. It felt risky, fragile. So did heart surgery, I shot back, but you still did it. Risk isn't an excuse for disregard. Have you ever looked someone in the eye and calmly unpacked every wound they pretended not to cause? It doesn't feel like anger. It feels like reclaiming oxygen. My mother's face was pale. We only wanted stability for you. No, I said. You wanted control. That was the truth they never admitted. They didn't hate tech. They hated not being able to shape it, to define it, to brag about it in a way their friends would instantly understand. They couldn't own it, so they ignored it. My mother looked away. Maybe we were afraid you'd fail. I did fail, I said. Many times, but I also built something. Something good. Something that helps people. You just never asked. My father shifted. What do you want from us now, Olivia? I thought about that. I want boundaries, I said. I want to be treated like an adult, not a project, not a disappointment. And not a trophy you suddenly want to polish now that I've succeeded. My mother's eyes welled up, but she blinked it away. You're still our daughter. I know, I said. And I love you both. But I'm not living for your approval anymore. I'm done trying to impress a version of you that never saw me. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It was holy. Like something had finally broken quietly, cleanly. They didn't argue. They didn't defend. For once, they just listened. After brunch, as I was leaving, my dad walked me to the door. I don't know how to fix what we missed, he said, but I'd like to try.
If you'll let me, I nodded. Trying is a good start.
Then he did something I hadn't seen in years. He smiled, not out of pride, but humility. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the city, the skyline twinkling in the distance. The same skyline I had stared at through co-working windows and late-night train rides, wondering if I'd ever be enough for the people who raised me. And now? I realized I already was, not because they finally saw me, but because I saw myself, and that was enough. The next day, Jason showed up at my office unannounced. He wore his usual pressed slacks and guilt in his eyes. I buzzed him in and led him past the front desk. He looked around, wide-eyed at the sleek, modern workspace. Is this all yours?
He asked. I smiled. Half mine. Emma owns the other half. He nodded slowly, taking it in. It's impressive.
We sat in the conference room. The same one where, just weeks ago, I'd signed away part of the company in a deal that would change my life. Jason looked at me. Liv, I owe you an apology. I know, I said, but go ahead. I let Mom and Dad shape how I saw you. I never really asked who you were, what you cared about. I just assumed you were lost. And now? He gave a rueful smile. Now I know you were just finding your own way. Better late then. Never, I said. He looked down. I didn't know how to feel when Sophia recognized you. I felt proud and ashamed. All at once. That's fair, I said. It's messy, but it's real. He looked at me, this time not as his weird techie sister, but as a peer. I hope we can stay close, he said. For real this time. We can, I said, but you'll have to call me first. He laughed. Deal. Later that week, the Horizon acquisition went public. Headlines read, Next Tech acquired for $215 million, founder Olivia Mitchell to remain CEO. The silent builder behind healthcare's smartest platform. My inbox flooded. Podcasts, profiles, people who'd ignored me now suddenly wanted a quote, a comment, a moment. I answered a few, declined most. Because I wasn't chasing the spotlight. I was just finally standing in it, and this time I wasn't stepping out. The weeks after the acquisition were surreal. Not because of the money, though waking up with a high 8-figure balance in my name was disorienting, but because for the first time in years, I felt like I was living one life, not two. The mask I used to wear at family dinners, the quiet deflection, the practiced humility, it was all gone. I was Olivia Mitchell, founder, CEO, the daughter who didn't follow the plan. And somehow made it work. The media buzzed for days. A local business magazine published a profile titled, The Reluctant Disruptor, How Olivia Mitchell Quietly Built a Health Tech Empire. A podcast called Women Who Build asked for an interview. I did a few press rounds not because I needed the attention, but because it mattered to be seen on my own terms. Still, with every headline, I waited for the fallout. And then one evening, it came. Jason called. Hey, he said, you free to talk? I looked at the time. 7:32 p.m., a Wednesday. Sure, can I come over? That was new. He arrived half an hour later, holding 2 iced coffees like we were in college again. No suit jacket. Just jeans and a gray hoodie. He looked tired, honest, like someone who hadn't stopped thinking since the dinner. We sat on my couch. He handed me a coffee. I wasn't sure what you liked anymore, he said. This is perfect, I replied. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. I've been thinking a lot, he started. About you. About everything. I waited. He exhaled. I feel like I've been living in a house of mirrors. Everything Mom and Dad said about you, ... I believed it, that you were drifting, wasting your potential. And the truth is, I never questioned it, not once. I didn't interrupt. I let him speak. And then that dinner happened, he continued. And I saw how wrong I'd been, not just about your work. About you. He looked at me then, really looked. You didn't just succeed, you did it with no support, no backup. And you didn't become bitter. You just kept going. I felt something shift in my chest, a warmth, a cautious kind of healing. Why now? I asked softly. What changed? Jason rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic from when we were kids. Honestly, Sophia. I raised an eyebrow. She was furious, he said, almost laughing. Not because you didn't tell us, but because we didn't know. She kept saying, how could you live with her and not see how brilliant she is? Smart woman, I said with a smile.
He smiled too. She asked me if I ever really knew you.
And I couldn't answer. That hurt, but it was honest. I'm sorry, love, he said, for every time I dismissed your work. For every time I played along with Mom and Dad instead of standing up for you. I used to be angry, I said, but now, I'm just tired of waiting for permission to be proud of myself. Jason nodded. You shouldn't need anyone's permission. Least of all mine. We sat in silence again. Then he said, I used to think success had to look a certain way, white coats, awards, textbook resumes. But you made something real. Something that works, that matters. I looked at him, seeing not the brother who once outshone me, but the man who finally saw me clearly. Thanks, I said. That means more than you know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. What's this? I asked. Open it. Inside was a photo. Me and Jason, ages 10 and 14. Sitting in front of our old desktop computer. He was holding a soccer ball. I was pointing at the screen, grinning. I found it in Mom's old albums, he said. Figured you should have it. I stared at it for a long moment. So much innocence. So much I didn't know back then. Do you remember that day? He asked. I nodded. That was the first time I made a website. I remember, he said. You showed me how to make a button change color. It blew my mind. We both laughed. I think that's the last time I ever saw you as the smart one, he said softly. Until now, there it was. The truth, it didn't sting. Not like it would have once. Because I'd grown too far beyond it to shrink back down. We talked for another hour about family, expectations, how Sophia was handling the headlines. Jason admitted our parents were scrambling, trying to reframe the story. They keep saying, well, we always knew she had potential. I rolled my eyes. Of course. But I've stopped playing along, he said. I told them, you didn't believe in her. You just hoped she'd become easier to explain at cocktail parties. I looked at him surprised. I figured it was time they heard it from someone they'd actually listened to. That meant something. When he left, he paused at the door. You know, he said, I spent most of my life thinking I had to be the golden child. The one who got it right. And now, he smiled. Now I think maybe you're the one I want to be when I grow up. I laughed, shaking my head. You're 2 years older than me, Jason. Yeah, he said, opening the door. And about 10 years behind. After he left, I pinned the photo to my wall. Not because I wanted to remember what was, but because I finally understood what had changed. It wasn't just the money, or the company, or the headlines. It was the power of being seen not for what I could become, but for what I already was. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real success. Not building something huge, but building it while no one believed you could. And still choosing to keep your heart open when they finally showed up. 6 months passed. The acquisition went through, the press faded, and the buzz settled into something quieter. I was still CEO Emma and I had stayed on, just like we promised, but the pressure was different now. Sharper, bigger, every decision carried more weight. Every mistake had more zeros attached, but I didn't mind. I wasn't building to prove myself anymore. I was building because it mattered. The money changed things, of course. I moved into a new apartment, a sunlit loft with exposed brick, high ceilings, and windows that overlooked the city instead of a parking lot. I upgraded my car, hired a personal assistant, and finally paid off every cent of student debt I'd quietly carried for years, but I didn't buy anything flashy, no designer bags, no red bottom heels. I still wore clean black blazers and kept my tech gear in the same worn backpack ID carried since my co-working days. Not because I couldn't afford more. Because I didn't need more. I'd already won the fight that mattered most, the fight to believe I was enough. My parents kept their distance for a while. After the brunch, there was a strange quiet, not angry, just cautious. Like they didn't know what version of themselves to be around me anymore. Then, one evening in early spring, I got an email from my mother. Just a few lines. Olivia, we'd love to come see your office sometime. If that's something you'd be okay with, Mom, no pressure. No assumptions. Just an ask. It was the first time in my life my mother had asked permission to enter my world. I said yes. They arrived the next week. Mom wore a neatly pressed blazer, her courtroom posture in full effect. Dad had a notebook in hand, like he was touring a hospital wing. I gave them the full walk-through glass meeting rooms, developer stations, the small meditation nook Emma insisted on building. I showed them the dashboard that tracked live performance metrics in hospitals across the country. And then I led them into my office. My name was etched on the glass door. Olivia Mitchell, Chief Executive Officer. I watched my mother stare at it, her lips parting slightly. No words. Just a long, quiet breath. In my office, I had one framed photo on the wall. Me and Emma. The day we launched the pilot. Both of us in mismatched hoodies, holding coffee cups, eyes full of exhaustion and joy. And next to that, the photo Jason gave me, the one of us as kids. Me showing him a color-changing button on our first family computer. My father looked around the room. This is incredible. It's home, I said. Mom finally spoke. You really built all this? With a team, I said. But yes. I wrote the first lines of code in a dorm room. My father's voice was low. We're sorry we didn't ask sooner. I nodded. Thank you. They didn't try to make it about them. They didn't claim they always knew. They just listened. And that was more healing than any apology could have been. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a tech summit in San Francisco. It was the first time I'd agreed to speak publicly. My topic? What happens when no one believes in you and you build it anyway? The crowd was packed. Founders, investors, students. I stood on stage in a navy blazer and jeans, no slides, no notes. Just a story, my story. I told them about building in silence. About being dismissed by the people closest to me. About learning that approval isn't a prerequisite for purpose. I ended with this. Some people build to impress the world. Others build because the world left them no choice. Either way, build something that feels like you, even if no one claps. Even if they call it a phase. Because one day you'll stop needing to be seen and start seeing yourself. The applause felt like thunder. But it was the quiet messages afterward that meant the most. A young girl in the audience emailed me that night. My mom keeps saying tech is a waste of time. I was going to switch majors. But then I heard you. Thank you for showing me what's possible. I saved that email. Because once upon a time, I was that girl. Jason and Sophia got married in a quiet ceremony by Lake Michigan. I wore a sleek navy dress and gave a speech that made him tear up. My parents sat beside me at the reception, beaming like nothing had ever been broken. And maybe it hadn't. Maybe it had just taken time to reshape, to rebuild. At one point during dinner, my mother leaned over. "I'm glad you didn't become a lawyer," she said softly. I turned to her, surprised. "You always said law was a real career," she smiled. I was wrong. What you built, it's more than a career, it's a legacy. On the 1-year anniversary of the acquisition, I took a walk down the street where our first office had been. The old co-working space was still there, same chip sign, same creaky glass door. I stood outside for a while, watching new founders move in and out, arms full of laptops and dreams. Then I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. For me, for Emma, for who we were back then, for the girl no one saw coming. That night, I sat on my balcony and opened the leather journal I kept locked in my desk drawer. The one I started the day we signed the acquisition papers. Inside, I had written 6 words. I built this without their permission. I smiled and flipped to the next page. And there, in clean ink, I wrote, "I forgive them." Not because they were right, but because I've outgrown the story they wrote for me. That was the thing no one told me about success. It's not a finish line. It's not a trophy. It's a quiet moment on a balcony, months after the noise has faded, where you realize you were never a failure. You were just becoming someone too big for their imagination. And now? You're free.